let's give us the ability to crouch. Unreal Engine has a built-in crouching mechanic, but I personally don't like it very much, and it's quite easy to make our own, so we're going to be doing that. So let's open our project settings, and in input, we want to create a crouch button, so we'll call it crouch, or crouch mapping, I should say, and I will parent it to left control. Now let's put the all this in BPC movement so we can keep it all in one Blueprint component. Just going to move this over this way. And we need two variables. So one will be crouch speed, and we'll make it a float of 200 by default. And we need one for crouch height. And this height is referencing our capsule component right here. And it's actually technically our half height, so we should probably rename it to be more accurate. But the default is 88, and if we were to decrease it, we become shorter. So let's change this back to 88. Compile and save. And we can actually change this name to crouch half height, so we are more accurate in our names. And we can change the default to 44. Do about half of what we are. Well, not about half, exactly half. So let's make a custom event, and we'll call it start crouch. And first thing we want to do is stop our stamina depletion, just in case we were sprinting and we go directly into a crouch from our sprint. So let's copy and paste this clear timer by function name, sprint timer. Oops. There we go. And then we want to set player max walk speed to our crouch speed. Compile and save. Now, one thing I want to mention that I made a small mistake in the last episode. I got Blueprint components mixed up with something else. We don't actually have to make these editable to see them in our L1 character. As you can see, like these four are not editable, but they still show up. So we can actually, you can turn those off if you want. The difference is whether they are public or private. So if you want ones not to be editable in here, kind of like the current stamina, we changed it to private. I'm going to do the same with the min stamina, change this to private. Compile and save. And now you can see we can only adjust our sprint speed, our walk speed, our max stamina, our crouch speed, and our crouch half height. So just to clear that up. So after we set our crouch speed, we need to shorten the height of our character's capsule. And we don't want to do this instantly, obviously, because that can look very janky and very snappy. So we're going to do it with a timeline. Timelines can't be created in Blueprint components, so as you can see, timeline. It's not there. So we have to do it in our character. So let's go to the event graph, and we have to make a custom event for this. So right click, custom event, and we'll call this shorten player capsule. And let's create a timeline. And we will call this capsule TL. And open it up. And first thing we want to do is set the length. So how long is it going to take your character to crouch? I will make mine take half a second. And let's make a float track. And we will call this alpha. We already made a timeline before, if you remember, for our doors. So should be slightly more familiar with what we're doing. This alpha channel will go from 0 to 1. And we will use a lerp node to make these whatever values we want. So let's create two keys, make the first one time 0 and value 0. The second one, the time, will be our length, which is 0.5, and the value will be 1. We can click these two icons right here to fit this, and we can select both, right click, and choose auto, so it's a bit smoother. Back in our event graph, we can plug this into play, and then we want to get our capsule component, and we want to set its half height, set capsule half height. Plug that into our update, and we will get our lerp node, and our alpha will go into the alpha. So A is whatever your current capsule is. Ours is 88. Set that as 88. You can make that a variable if you'd like. And B will come from our BPC movement. So BPC movement, and we'll get crouch half height is what we called it, and plug that into B. Lastly, we want to create another custom event, and we'll call this lengthen player capsule for standing back up, and we will plug this into reverse. Compile and save. So back in BPC movement, we will have to get our player ref, and since this is a reference to character and not our L1 character specifically, we'll have to cast to the L1 character with this as the object. And we can right click on it and convert it to a pure cast. We don't need the execution nodes. And then as the L1 character, we just can call shortened player capsule. Alright, let's make a custom event. We'll call this end crouch. And we just want to set our player max walk speed to our walk speed. And then we just want to get our cast, and we want to call lengthen player capsule. Lastly, we will need a boolean, and we were going to call this is crouching. Set that to a bool, and we can set is crouching to true at the end of start crouch, and set it to false at the end of end crouch. Compile and save. And then in L1 character, we have to create an input for what we made at the beginning, which is our crouch input. We set ours to left control, and on pressed, we want to get our BPC movement, and we want to call start crouch, and we want to call end crouch, and then we want to get is crouching, and we will ask if we are crouching, and if we are, we want to end crouch, and if we're not, we want to start crouching, just so we can toggle between them. So compile and save. Before we test, I'm going to set our crouch speed to 100 to make a more discernible difference, and we can test it out. So let's hit play, walking around, and then we hit left control, and the timeline shortens our player capsule. Now when we walk around, we're much slower. Hit left control again, and we're at our regular speed. Now we have a small bug, and that is if we crouch and then we start sprinting, we just start sprinting while we're crouched, and we don't want to be able to do that. So let's go into BPC movement. So to fix this, we can just go into our start sprint, and on our start sprint, we have to make this a second branch instead of just adding on to the and I'll show you why. Let's create another branch, and we're asking if we're crouching, and if we're not, we can just go into the regular, but if we are, we want to call end crouch, and then we want to continue. So if we hit sprint while we're crouching, they will stop crouching and continue on to the sprint, so it won't just disable sprinting completely. For stop sprint, we want to add a branch and ask if crouching is false, or you could get a not boolean and plug it in like that. So if we are not crouching, that's true. And the reason we have to add it to stop sprint as well is because if we are crouching and we hit and we press down left shift, which calls start sprint, let's pretend for a second that this doesn't do anything. So it doesn't let us sprint. And then we were to release it, then it would set our speed back to our walk speed. So we would have our walk speed, but continue to crouch. So we can plug that back into the true, and we should be bug free. So let's hit play. We can walk around normal, we can sprint around normal. And if we hit crouch and I start sprinting, he uncrouches and we are sprinting. And if I start sprinting and I hit crouch, he goes right into crouching. Then we hit sprint, stops crouching, and it gets back up. Great. It all seems to work very well. All right. That should be it for our crouching. And I'll see you in the next episode.